Campaign 2022 intensifies. Welcome to Columbus on the Record. 5 weeks of summer remain, but the fall campaigns heated up this week. First to the governor's race, the Republican Governors Association's PAC is spending $500,000 on a TV ad attacking Democrat Nan Whaley. Cleveland Plain Dealer analysis of the donor pool for that group shows a lot of big Ohio donors contributed. That group includes some Mike DeWine appointees to boards and commissions. Nan Whaley continues to run introductory ads. State Democrats released an internal poll this week that shows Whaley basically tied with Mike DeWine. Emerson College also released a poll this week that showed DeWine up by 16 percentage points, which is where this race has been through the summer. Herb Asher, which poll do you believe?
I'm always skeptical of internal polls. I used to write sometimes internal polls that would get the results we wanted. But so let's start with the Emerson poll. Let's assume that the governor does have a double-digit lead and that Nan Whaley is a heavy underdog. What would it take for her to win? And one thing about the Emerson poll, the only good thing I think for her is that the governor's actually at 49%. And this is a longtime Ohio politician. Everybody knows who Mike DeWine is. He's at 49, not above 50, and now it's only a two-candidate race. So that's the only good thing I can pull out of that. But what would have to happen for Nan Whaley to win? There would have to be major news about House Bill 6, corruption, scandal, which the reporters now are really putting out a lot of good, interesting stories.
We'll get into that in a moment, but the internal poll showed that 36% of those questioned had never heard of Nan Whaley, Daryl. Is that good news or bad news for her? She can still introduce herself, but it's getting kind of late.
You're exactly right, Mike. That would be my assessment as well. It's mostly bad news. We're a couple weeks out from Labor Day, back in the day, the traditional kickoff for a campaign, but my goodness, it's way, way earlier than that if you're going to make an impression. Just to heard of you. I mean, we're not even close to talking about making a sale against a politician who's been on the ballot since the 1970s. So she has a long, long ways to go.
Mike DeWine, only 1% had never heard of him. I wonder who that 1% is.
Well, right, but that even brings into deeper relief how the favorables on him are not great. So that makes that all the more important.
He is at the same favorability rate. He's got 1 point advantage over Joe Biden nationally. Mike Onidakis.
Yeah, look, people that don't like the governor will still not like him regardless if there's a primary or not. But at the end of the day, as the Emerson poll, not a Democrat or Republican poll, but the Emerson poll points out 16 points up right now, a couple weeks from Labor Day. We're in Ed Fitzgerald territory right now. This is going to be a monumental victory for the Republican Party. Mike DeWine at the top of the ticket, or J.D. Vance. We'll get into that as well. But at the end of the day, Mike, look, it's my job to know the name of the Democrat nominee for Auditor of State, Treasurer of State, Secretary of State, and Attorney General. I don't know who it is. I can't. If you ask me right now, I have no idea who the nominees are for those other statewide offices, which I think puts a bow around this entire statewide race.
But what does it say, Herb, that the Republican Governors Association is spending all this money on Nan Whaley?
That's not a lot of money, actually, in the grand scheme of things. But they're just trying to secure the margin. But let me go back to the other things that may happen. Again, if we really do have revelations that corruption goes to the very top of the administration, that will be something that would be helpful to Nan Whaley, but she doesn't control that. She'll also benefit if the Republicans in the legislature continue to do crazy things, although my guess is they'll do them after the election rather than before. What she really needs is what presumably J.D. Vance is getting from Mitch McConnell and the Senate Republicans. She needs a massive infusion of funds.
She's got to be closer to than 15 or 16%.
Even if there is a major outbreak of scandal or whatever, you've got to take advantage of that. You've got to weaponize that, and she doesn't have that.
Daryl, the danger is she could drag down a Tim Ryan. She could drag down a Jennifer Brunner, who's running for Chief Justice on the Ohio Supreme Court, if she doesn't keep it close.
In theory, yeah, and affect the redistricting commission into the next decade, and all those fun factors as well. Yeah, I don't know if we're in Ed Fitzgerald territory or not. I mean, once it came out that he didn't have a driver's license, that candidacy was just going down in flames.
For those who forget, Ed Fitzgerald ran unsuccessfully against John Kasich.
In 2014, yes. And yeah, very, very unsuccessful.
It was a disaster, and I don't see it in that kind of light this time.
I predicted it.
Mike DeWine is running, he hasn't run very many ads, but most of his ads early on have been positive ads. Is this going to be his strategy, Mike, where he lets the outside group do the negative ad and he does the nice, warm and fuzzy?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think any campaign staffer would give him that advice, whether it's someone like the professor here or a brand new staffer from high school. I mean, you're up, you're winning. You have a lot to talk about. Just talk about Intel for the next 45, 60 days, and the jobs that are coming.
Does he do ads touting his boldness at the start of the COVID pandemic?
That's a good question. Probably not. There's probably not a reason to talk about COVID. We're past it. We're past it now. We've come out on the right end of it. So I don't think you need to do that. I think you talk about where we are in Ohio with national headwinds that are against us, but we're doing pretty darn well here in the great state of Ohio.
Neil Peterson and the possibly independent candidate, although he voted in the Republican primary, is not going to be on the ballot. Possibly could have peeled away conservative votes from Mike DeWine. That has to help him, Mike DeWine, then.
Yeah, I mean, it has to help him. It's anything like that, and it would have hurt him, otherwise, if it was going to get any closer than that. So it's not going to be that interesting. It kind of depends. I mean, those voters might just go away. They may not vote at all. That's what you hear people say anecdotally. That, well, I don't like him and I don't like her, so I'm not going to vote at all. I think it's interesting the breakdown between men and women likely voters on this, and the issue of abortion could come to the fore and be critical going forward. It just depends on how it's played. Yes.
According to the Emerson poll, abortion is only 12%. It's only 12%. The economy is 50%. Gas prices, food prices, the inflation. That's what matters. According to the Emerson poll, which we've just talked about,
care about, but as far as what voters
12%.
are voting for, I think.
So, Daryl, if you're down by 16 points, should Nan Whaley just go bold and just focus in on the abortion issue? It's a clear dividing line between the two candidates. She's a woman. Try to make up some ground there.
Well, I think it's two prongs. I think, as Herb mentioned, it's try to paint him with that brush of corruption, the largest scandal in Ohio history. And then you try to go for what polling shows is at least a quote-unquote pro-choice majority in Ohio. There's a lot of subtleties to that polling, but just generically speaking, yeah. We're not quite in the Hail Mary stage yet. But absent money, I mean, how does she even do? I mean, we're talking about what she could do.
She doesn't have any money.
And let's face it. My own profession, the news media. There are fewer people out there covering this race. And so she talks about, the candidates call it free media, earned media, we call it free media. Fewer people covering events. So getting the word out is, there's some social media, but still the TV ads.
All right, in the race for U.S. Senate, J.D. Vance has not raised nearly as much money as Tim Ryan has, but national Republicans are investing in Vance. A PAC closely tied to GOP Senate Leader Mitch McConnell plans to spend up to $28 million on TV and radio ads. The announcement comes as an Emerson College poll shows a tight race with J.D. Vance leading Tim Ryan 45% to 42%. That is just within the poll's margin of error. Mike Onadakis, what do you think of J.D. Vance's campaign so far?
So far, so good. I think his strategy is correct. Wait till when people are starting to pay attention. Again, as Daryl said, after Labor Day. That's not just the new phenomenon. That's been going on for decades in the United States and the state of Ohio. Look, Tim Ryan won July 2022. That's great, I guess, if you want. He has peaked. He has hit his highest point right now. $6 million or so spent in June, July? That's it. And I actually thank him for doing that, because now there's $28 million, according to Cleveland.com, Cleveland Plain Dealer, that are coming in after Labor Day when people are paying attention to support J.D. Vance. It's a midterm election and already out of power. J.D. is going to win this race. And at the end of the day, when you're done spending $28 million in the matter of 60 days, you're going to move the needle if it needs to be moved anyways.
It's closer than anybody thought. So a similar amounts of money could be coming in that were not otherwise expected from Democratic supporters across the country.
Tim Ryan won round one.
Yeah.
And round one actually influences the donors from all over the country.
Right.
Ohio's race is now on the radar screen for a lot of people. So it's not going to be $28 million to $0. And I don't think that Ryan has to match the 28 million or whatever, but I think he's going to have ample funds to get his message out.
Mitch
And
McConnell, in interviews, he kind of tried to lower the expectations of Republicans winning the Senate. He basically said, we have a lot of first-time candidates out there. Is J.D. Vance among those candidates he's worried about, Daryl?
The very fact that the national Republicans think they have to pop 28 mil into Ohio in a state where Trump won by, 8 points twice, where certainly Rob Portman had no trouble in his last reelection. It's everyone's saying Ohio's no longer a swing state; it's a red state. Well, what's going on here? So I think that says a lot, and I agree with her. And I think Tim Ryan had to spend early. There was always that strategic decision: do I hang on to my money when I really need it, or do I spend money to make money and to get that credibility of threshold with donors and especially the Democratic National Senate Committee.
Yeah.
The other thing that's going on, I think Republicans are saying, well, we thought we had really good chances in Pennsylvania and other states, and now it's maybe not looking so good. So maybe
Money's coming here.
better throw a couple sandbags in Ohio.
He did what Nan Whaley wished she could have done, which is spend a boatload of money on getting people to identify who he is.
Mike Gonidakis, J.D. Vance did not raise a lot of money in the primary. Peter Thiel helped him out. He has not raised a lot of money for the general so far that we know of. Mitch McConnell and this group is helping him out. Have you ever seen a candidate not raise a lot of money and still be successful?
Well, in the world we live in, post-Citizens United, yeah, we have. But traditionally speaking, no. Usually if you can't raise money from your friends, neighbors, and donors, then you're not going to be successful. He's bucked that trend. He's got President Trump's support. Ohio firmly supports President Trump, and it's going to carry the day. I just don't see, with Mike DeWine having a 16-point lead, voters walking into the voting booth, if we still do that, I know we got early voting now, but and say, I'm going to vote for Mike DeWine, but then I'm going to come over here and vote for Tim Ryan. I just don't see that happening.
Herb, do you see that split ticket happening?
some of it, sure. And you don't need a lot of it to change the outcome of the election. And again, Ryan has really hit a lot of the appropriate themes. And the comment here about the Republicans having many first-time candidates for the U.S. Senate, that shows up actually in J.D. Vance. He's making unforced errors. And of course, his past is also catching up to him on certain areas like this recent story.
Yeah, that story, the Associated Press reported late this week that for Vance's charity, which was aimed at combating the opioid crisis in southeastern Ohio and Appalachia, he hired a doctor who basically disputes that the crisis was caused by opioid prescriptions. And now that the charity has gone dark, and the AP reported that, and Daryl, Tim Ryan's ads have been pointing this out.
Well, yeah, not only that, the doctor has ties to Purdue Pharmacy, a major maker of OxyContin. There's been reporting by ProPublica, New York Times, others, that the doctor vetted her papers before Purdue Pharmacy. So I think there's probably legitimate questions to be raised here about, and again, that seems such an antiquated view now. Really, the painkillers didn't lead to opioid crisis. I think Ohio's pretty much proof that that is not the case.
About
Quite the
ground
contrary.
zero here for one thing, a well-documented ground zero. Here's the other thing. J.D. Vance says he didn't know. You mean you appointed this person to this fellowship position and you didn't know?
You funded, yeah.
Mike?
I'm disheartened here, guys, respectfully, because we have 52,511 licensed physicians in the state of Ohio. None of them want to bother to go down to southern Ohio and help the poorest of the poor. J.D. Vance finds a credentialed doctor to go do that. They pay for her to spend a year of her life down there. I'm going to read this here. The Lawrence County leadership down there in Lawrence County, which is close to ground zero, said, the doctor helped people struggling in southern Ohio, according to the Associated Press. They are thankful for her presence. So why we sit around the table here today and we take pot shots at people politically, J.D. did something. He stepped up and she helped people in Lawrence County. Let's give him credit for that.
But primarily what she's going to be doing going forward is create scholarship from this. And if her scholarship is embedded in a discounted idea that the big pharma wasn't involved in the opioid crisis, then that is problematic to a lot of people that are paying attention.
Don't forget that a lot of the rest of the money that was raised for this charity or what have you went to future J.D. Vance political aides.
Herb, does this issue stick? It's kind of complicated.
Well, I think it will stick if the Democrats take advantage of it appropriately, and I think they will. I mean, this is actually a quote-unquote a charity that seems to have done some things that really don't work in favor of the people it was designed to help. And having somebody who's actually writing reports saying it wasn't really the drug companies or the pharmacies or the pharmaceutical representatives, it's the fault of the people. You know, and there's actually a theme like that in Hillbilly Elegy. When you finally read the book, it's a beautifully written book actually, but when you read it, it's, well, I got out of here. I made it, J.D. Vance, I made it on my own. But you know, people down here, they're their own worst enemy. That's a little harsh. They deserve some responsibility, but this woman seems to be in fact saying it's
He's pretty much in line with his thinking that personal responsibility should come first.
also in line with the pharmacy
Yeah,
companies.
yeah, and if I was J.D. Vance, which I'm not, but if I was, I would run a 30-second ad with all those people in Lawrence County. I'd film it down there, showing all the people that I helped with this doctor down there, and that would be more powerful than, you know, Purdue Pharma.
Okay. Our next question. Questions continue. Our next issue. Questions continue about how active the DeWine administration was in its support of the nuclear bailout law, the law known as HB 6. Led to the indictments of former House Speaker Larry Householder and 4 others. Text messages indicate Lieutenant Governor John Husted was actively involved, even though he told reporters last fall he played no role in the legislative process. Now he and Governor DeWine say they always supported the bailout, but left the details to lawmakers. Darrell Rowland, it's creeping a little closer to the administration, but it's still, this is far from a smoking gun. They have legitimate reasons for supporting the bailout. That's what they said they did, and they didn't do anything wrong here. Just that the answer that Husted gave wasn't, it conflicted with what the text messages said.
Right. The continuing mantra from the DeWine administration is this is nothing new, this is nothing new. Well, incrementally, this is not something new. At least, I mean, I'm sure it's not new to them. They were there. But as far as voters and the public and the rest of us, yeah, there is a little more involvement. Again, as you say, not huge revelatory, but okay. They said before, for example, well, we don't think we're public official 1, public official 2, which is the verbiage in the federal investigation into the $60, bazillion scandal. Yeah. But now it turns out they probably are. They actually are. So, okay, and involvement, okay. They're relying on them saying, battlefield, we need DeWine and Husted to do battlefield triage to save the nomination of Sam Randazzo as head of the PUCO, Public Utilities Commission of Ohio, that regulates all these things. So that sounds like involvement to me as well, and a very key player. And Sam Randazzo, of course, has been acknowledged that he accepted a $4.3 billion bribe.
Mike Randazzo has to be a liability for the DeWine administration.
Well, maybe. We'll see.
He appointed him, and now he's under investigation of being accused of bribery.
Yeah, he claims he's innocent. We'll see. That's why we have trials, and we have the Constitution, innocent until proven guilty. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. We'll find out. Here's the thing. We keep talking about text messages. These weren't text messages between the governor and this disgraced former CEO of First Energy. These were internal text messages between the disgraced former CEO and his goons that worked for him, going back and forth.
Vice president.
That's hearsay, okay, at best. You can't, they have nothing to do with it. He can't control what
they haven't
text messages. If Ann and I texted about you, Mike,
but
it has nothing to do with you.
But Husted and DeWine have not denied the accuracy of these text messages.
Well, no, they said they support nuclear.
Exactly.
So does Joe Biden and Sherrod Brown. They just signed the Inflation Something Act, and that there's nuclear subsidies in there.
They didn't bribe anyone to get it passed.
Yeah, right. Well, Joe Manchin, they did. How much did they give West Virginia?
Here's the thing. You said they didn't do anything wrong, but this is a checks and balances system we have in this state. And usually when you ask the governor about whether you're going to sign a bill or not, he's got to take a look at it. He doesn't say, I'll just let the legislature handle it and let the chips fall where they may. He guards that stuff very closely. He usually takes his time on some of the most benign things there are out there. And this goes through the Ohio General Assembly like greased lightning. And he signs it the day or the day after, I think, that that it was passed by the General Assembly.
Herb?
Look, Randazzo has long-term ties with John Husted. They're friends for a long time. Randazzo has worked very closely with the former chief of staff for the governor. This is getting closer and closer. And what I found interesting is that the feds, the U.S. attorney, asked PUCO to stop your investigation now because it may interfere with what we're doing. And and everybody's been talking that there will be more indictments on this. The question becomes who,
And when.
for what, and when. Yeah.
Will it be before
And
the election?
so
no way. Yeah, no way.
Well,
We shall see.
Well, I mean, there's DOJ. I don't know how formal it is, but there's basically DOJ rules that I think they don't do anything hardly within 60 days of an election. That's why when Comey talked about Hillary Clinton in 2016, how was it so extraordinary?
Right. Okay, I was going to say.
All right, let's get to our last topic. Central Ohio school kids are either back in class or will be in the next week or so. While schools are monitoring COVID closely and scrubbing surfaces, the school experience is pretty much back to normal. But schools are strained. There is a teacher shortage. The largest teachers union in Ohio says there are 17,000 fewer people working in K through 12 education compared to 3 years ago. Nationally, some 300,000 teachers and staff have quit since the pandemic started. And on top of that, Columbus City School teachers may strike next week. The union is looking for an 8% pay raise every year for 3 years. The school board is offering a 3% raise per year. Ann Fisher, are the teachers in Columbus trying to take advantage of the market right now? There is a shortage of supply of teachers because of the shortage, so they're trying 8% a year is a pretty ambitious ask.
I don't think they're trying to exploit the market. The market has been what it is for a long time. There has been a teacher shortage in this country for 50 years. Where it's really becoming noticed and why this has become a story is because wealthy suburban school districts are experiencing the teacher shortage now too. So it's not about money necessarily, it's about a lot of other things. The low pay of teachers is only, the issue of that is only exacerbated by a lot of other things. I think a very telling thing is that Federation of Teachers, American Federation of Teachers did a survey very recently that showed that 75% of teachers, or 74%, would not recommend the job to an incoming or prospective teacher. That is 74% now. 2 years ago, it was in the 40% range. That bodes a much more serious problem. I don't think they're exploiting. I think they're just trying to get what they think they deserve.
Former teacher, retired, Herb Asher. Now you're teaching college, a little different than third grade in the Columbus City schools, but still.
Yeah, no, look.
It's your profession.
We all hope, we would like to have normalcy this year. I don't know what the right settlement is, but I think we all hope that the kids in Columbus will go back to school under regular in-classroom teaching and that we not have a strike, because the strike will add another element of instability or whatever. But I do think the teachers are, I think they're doing two things here. Clearly they're trying to get what they think is the appropriate compensation, and they are taking advantage, I think appropriately, of a market and an opportunity. But I really do think that this is a year in which it's time to get back to as much normalcy as we can.
So, Mike, if there is a strike in Columbus, who takes the blame? The union or the school board for not reaching an agreement here?
Look, shame on both. These are adults, and we're talking about kids. Kids should always come first at the end of the day. But I have a sympathetic heart for the teachers, because where did the billions of hundreds of millions of dollars of COVID money that the Columbus Public Schools got, and they received some of the most of any school district because it's the largest, where did it all go? They're mismanaging the money at the school board level when it should be going to teachers. So I'm sympathetic to the teachers' plight. I want them to be in school immediately. These kids should not be at home learning. But the school board needs to be held accountable. Where's the money?
Daryl, the politics of this, for weeks and weeks, we kept hearing this was all about air conditioning and maintenance of the schools from the union. Well, lo and behold, it comes out in the last couple of days that they want an 8% raise.
It's always about money.
It's always about the money.
But air conditioning, that is kind of a grabber issue. Now, maybe not as much last week. We've had good weather, but yeah. I mean, because we start school so early now. Yeah. I think everyone could sympathize with those kids in those classrooms. And teachers and staffers, whoever has to work there in these hot August days.
Yeah, but because the parents will sympathize with the lack of air conditioning. The teachers are fighting for my kids to be comfortable when.
They have had a chronic teacher shortage in the Columbus City schools because they don't pay them enough, for one thing. It's a crummy place to work in a lot of those buildings. I had a parent call me today saying that every single building their child has been in has been under-maintained. They've let things go. They've let things slide. You're right about the COVID money. Why don't they have air conditioning in every single building?
School facility commission money.
We got to get to our off-the-record parting shots, and Mike Gonidakis, you're up first.
Yeah, heavy heart. Mike, I have to say the boom times are over, my friend. Within the next 30, 45 days, you're going to see a lot of layoffs coming. According to media reports this week, over half of U.S. companies are going to be laying people off before the end of 2022. Food costs, gas costs, inflation, feds are going to continue to raise interest rates. I say that I'm not rooting for this. This is bad. What I'm trying to say is people in TV land, save your money because you're going to need it.
All right, Herb Asher.
After 4 years of the federal authorities investigating former Speaker Cliff Rosenberger, I believe that the authorities have found nothing of substance, and there will soon be a very happy ending of this whole episode for Cliff Rosenberger.
Interesting. Ann Fisher.
Like I said, I had a parent call me today. They said that although they think that the board is acting in good faith, that in the end they're going to side with the teachers on this. And I think that's what most of the community is. And that means, the board's the one that's up for election, not the teachers.
And Daryl.
Yeah, as perhaps many of your viewers know, last Friday was my last day, not planned, at the Columbus Dispatch after 31 years. So this is my first, and who knows, last appearance on your show not as a Dispatch reporter. So I just, for whatever the future brings, that's in God's hands, but it's been a pleasure over the years. And folks in Columbus area, you don't know what a gem you have here. You look at it on the national TV networks and see all the shouting and all that crap. The serious discussion of issues here that Mike leads, you have a treasure here in Central Ohio.
Well, thank you, Daryl, and thank you for your years of service, and we are going to miss your reporting and your contributions to this show.
Thank you, Herbert.
All right. My final comment, WOSU in Columbus lost a pioneering broadcaster this week. Former WOSU news director and station manager Don Davis died at the age of 89. Don helped build what is WOSU today, in particular its news department. He greatly expanded the department. He hired Bill Cohen, of all people. He produced TV documentaries for WOSU. After he retired, he and his wife Tish continued to support WOSU and many arts organizations here in Columbus. So with gratitude for all that he did for us, we extend our deepest sympathies to the Davis family. That is Columbus on the Record for this week. Check us out online, Facebook, and our website, wosu.org/COTR. For our crew and for our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.